The cub lay still on the grass, its tiny chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular breaths. The man kept a respectful distance, watching as it struggled to regain its bearings. Its limbs were stiff from the cold, its fur matted and slick with water, but it had stopped crying. There was a brief, fragile moment of calm, the quiet that filled the space heavy with the weight of survival and uncertainty. The man remained kneeling beside the cub, his breath slow and steady, but his heart quick with anxiety. The savannah, so vast and often full of life, now felt empty, as if the world was holding its breath. He glanced around the wide-open landscape, searching for any sign of its mother. There were no movements in the distance, no other animals in sight. The river flowed silently beside them, its murmur soft and constant, but still there was an undeniable emptiness. The man knew lions were social creatures, and the cub would need its mother, its pride, to survive. Without them, the situation was tenuous at best. He could feel the weight of that uncertainty in the air, the pressing question of what would happen next. Would the mother be nearby, or had the cub been separated by some cruel twist of fate? The man's instincts urged him to keep moving, to get the cub to safety, but he knew that rushing would not help. He needed to wait for a sign, for some clue that would tell him how to proceed. The cub's body trembled slightly beneath his hands, but its eyes remained closed. The faint sound of its whimpering had faded, replaced by the stillness of the savannah. The wind stirred the grass around them, a quiet reminder of the land's pulse, ever moving, ever alive. He reached down and gently stroked the cub's fur, his touch light and careful. His heart clenched as he felt the animal's fragile form beneath his fingers, still so young, still so helpless. "We're going to make it," he whispered, though he knew the words were not a promise he could keep. Not yet. They were just a quiet hope, something to hold on to in the uncertain silence that surrounded them. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The man kept his eyes on the horizon, his focus unwavering, but the landscape seemed unchanged. No movement, no signs of life. It was only him and the cub in the vast emptiness of the savannah. The cub was still, its breathing steady but slow. And then, just as the man was beginning to lose hope, he saw movement on the far edge of the clearing. A figure, small and powerful, moving through the tall grass. The Lioness. Her golden coat shimmered in the fading light of the afternoon, her movements graceful and deliberate. She was cautious at first, her eyes scanning the area, but there was no mistaking her. This was the cub's mother. Her gaze flickered over the man, a sharp, assessing look, but she did not approach immediately. The man stood, not wanting to startle her, his breath held as she moved closer. The lioness stopped a few feet away from the cub, her body tense, her eyes locked onto the small form on the ground. The air was thick with tension, and for a long moment neither the man nor the lioness moved. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Slowly, the lioness lowered her head, her nose twitching as she took in the scent of her cub. She nudged the small body with her nose, and the cub stirred, its tiny eyes fluttering open. The man's heart skipped a beat, his relief so palpable it almost hurt. The cub let out a soft whimper, but there was no fear in its voice. It knew its mother. The lioness's eyes softened, a quiet but profound recognition passing between them. Without a sound, the lioness began to nudge the cub gently, her movements tender but firm, guiding it slowly to its feet. The man stepped back, allowing the mother and cub to reunite. There was no need for words, no need for grand gestures. The lioness was calm now, her presence commanding yet full of quiet reassurance. She was doing what needed to be done, guiding her cub with an innate grace that only a mother could possess. The man could feel the connection between them, a bond that needed no explanation, no translation. It was simply there, undeniable, in the way the lioness moved, in the way the cub responded. As the lioness helped her cub gain its footing, the man watched quietly from the edge of the clearing, his heart swelling with emotion. The cub was alive, safe in the care of its mother, and the danger had passed. The savannah once again seemed to come alive with the rhythm of life returning. The lioness gave one last glance toward the man, her eyes full of recognition and silent gratitude. Then, with a soft grunt, she turned and moved slowly into the grass, the cub following close behind, its movements unsteady but filled with determination. The man stood there, watching them disappear into the vast expanse of the savannah. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the land, and in that quiet moment, the world felt at peace. He turned slowly and began to make his way back, his heart full, knowing that the savannah, with all its wild beauty and raw power, had once again found balance. The man had done his part, and now it was the lioness's turn, and as the golden light bathed the earth, he carried with him the quiet knowledge that this was a moment, small but profound, one that would remain with him forever. The cub lay on the soft grass, its tiny body still trembling, but the desperate cries that had once filled the air had faded into weak, soft whimpers. The man worked quickly but carefully, wrapping the cub in a blanket to shield it from the coolness of the savannah's evening air. His heart still raced with the urgency of the moment, but there was a change in the atmosphere, a subtle shift that made him pause. It was the quiet, unsettling feeling of being watched. He looked up, his gaze sweeping across the vast expanse of the savannah that stretched endlessly before him. It was then that he saw her, a figure barely noticeable against the tall grasses, moving with the kind of quiet grace only a predator could possess. The lioness emerged from the brush, her golden coat blending seamlessly with the landscape, her body sleek and powerful, yet perfectly attuned to the rhythms of the wild. But it was her eyes, those amber eyes, that held the man in place. They were fixed firmly on him, unwavering, filled with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. She was not charging, but her gaze was full of intent, and the weight of it pressed down on him. The man's breath caught in his throat as their eyes locked, a tense, almost electric connection between them. The lioness stood at the edge of the clearing, her muscles coiled in readiness, though her body remained still. The man's instincts screamed at him to remain calm, to avoid making any sudden movements, to show no threat. His heart beat loudly in his chest, the silence between them thick with anticipation. The cub lay quietly at his feet, still wrapped in the blanket, as though it too sensed the importance of the moment, the delicate balance between life and death hanging in the air. The man's mind raced. How long had she been watching? Was she the cub's mother, or had she been part of a pride that had already moved on? There was no way to know for sure, no way to predict what the lioness would do next. The uncertainty pressed in on him, but he didn't move. Then, as if a silent decision had been made, the lioness took a slow, deliberate step forward. Each movement she made was measured, calculated, and her gaze never wavered from the man's face. She approached the cub cautiously, her steps quiet, yet filled with the weight of purpose. There was a recognition in her eyes, a deep, primal understanding that the cub was in danger, that it was hurt, and that she was here now to assess whether it was safe. The man stood still, his posture relaxed but alert, giving the lioness the space she needed to approach. He whispered softly. His words meant as much for his own peace of mind as for the lioness's. "I've got him. I won't hurt him." The words felt fragile, but the softness of his tone seemed to carry through the air, resonating with the lioness in a way he couldn't have anticipated. She paused, her powerful frame towering over the cub, her breathing slow and measured as she took in the scene before her. For a long moment, everything held still. The lioness's eyes flickered between the cub and the man, the weight of their shared space heavy in the air. Time stretched thin, and it was as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, in one fluid movement, the lioness lowered her head towards the cub, her nose gently brushing against its tiny body. She sniffed the air, her senses finely attuned to the familiar scent of her young, her body. Language softened, and the man, holding his breath, watched as the cub stirred, its eyes fluttering open weakly. A faint sound escaped its throat, a tentative sign of life returning. The lioness nudged her cub gently with her nose, a simple yet profound gesture of care and recognition. The cub's small body responded, its head lifting slightly as it sought the comfort of its mother's touch. The man took a step back, his role now clear. He had done what he could, and now the lioness had arrived. The bond between mother and cub, fragile but undeniable, was being restored in front of him, a quiet reunion that needed no words. The lioness's gaze softened, the hardness in her eyes giving way to a fleeting expression of relief. It was a brief yet profound moment of silent recognition, a communication beyond language, a mother reclaiming her young. The man understood, without needing to be told, that his intervention had been a temporary necessity, and now it was time for the lioness to take over. With one final glance at the man, the lioness turned her full attention back to the cub. She nudged it again, this time more gently, guiding it with the same instinctual care that had led her to this moment. The savannah, which had once seemed heavy with tension, now seemed to exhale, the silence replaced by the quiet, calming rhythm of nature. The bond between mother and cub was palpable, and in that moment everything seemed to return to its rightful place in the wild. The lioness and her cub, together again, stood in the heart of the savannah as the man watched, knowing that his part in this story was over, and that the savannah had once again claimed its own. The air was still, holding the weight of the quiet moments that had passed. The lioness, her movements careful and deliberate, continued to nuzzle her cub, her head lowering gently to ensure the small one was unharmed. Every touch was filled with purpose, checking, confirming, comforting. Her large, powerful frame seemed to envelop the cub in its warmth, offering the kind of protection only a mother could provide. The baby elephant, still weak from the strain of its ordeal, lay beside them, its body fragile and its eyes flickering in and out of sleep, the exhaustion of the last few hours still evident in its slow, shallow breaths. The man, standing a respectful distance away, watched as the lioness moved with quiet focus. There was no rush, no panic, just a calm and composed presence, the bond between mother and cub reaffirming itself in the stillness. Then something unexpected occurred. After a few moments of tender care, The lioness paused, her movements becoming slower, almost as if she had sensed something in the air. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes locking onto the man's for a brief moment. There was no aggression, no fear in her gaze, just a calm, measured look, as if she were considering him, acknowledging his presence. For a second, everything seemed to slow down, as if the world itself was holding its breath. In that moment, the man stood completely still, his body tense with anticipation, waiting for the next move. The lioness's gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer, and then, without a sound, she gave a soft grunt, a quiet, unspoken signal. The lioness turned then, her large body moving with deliberate grace. It was as though she had made a decision, one that spoke of both acceptance and independence. She hesitated for a moment, her body still, and the man could feel the weight of that pause. His heart beat in his chest, but he did not move. He knew this was her moment, her decision to make. Slowly, with a purposeful stride, the lioness began to walk away, the cub stumbling slightly to keep up, but never falling behind. She moved toward the tall grasses at the edge of the clearing, a natural path opening in the dense vegetation, as if the savannah itself made room for them. The man watched in awe, feeling a deep, silent respect for the creature before him. It was a gesture of trust, an acknowledgement that, despite human intervention, the bond between mother and cub remained paramount. It wasn't a dramatic moment of triumph, nor was it a symbol of dominance. Instead, it was a quiet, powerful act of nature reclaiming its course. The cub, still fragile but determined, followed closely behind its mother, their movements synchronized, their presence together unbroken. And just like that, the lioness and her cub, unsteady but resilient, began to disappear into the wild. The man remained motionless, his gaze fixed on them as they walked away. The savannah once again seemed to close in around them, the vastness of the land swallowing the mother and cub into its endless embrace. It was a moment of closure, a silent acceptance that this was where they belonged. The lioness, after everything, had taken her cub back into the wild as she should. There were no roars of victory, no loud declarations of success, only the quiet understanding between the two beings that they had been given a second chance together. It was enough. As the last of the sun's rays cast long shadows over the earth, the man took a deep, steady breath. The tension that had filled the air moments before seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of peace. The savannah, alive with the hum of the evening, returned to its natural rhythm. He knew with certainty that the lioness and her cub would be fine. They had been given the gift of survival, and in return, they had given him something no words could fully express, something profound, a fleeting moment of grace. In the quiet of the savannah, as the shadows grew longer and the world continued on, the man stood still, knowing that sometimes the greatest moments of connection are found in the most simple, unspoken exchanges.